In this video, I'm going to be talking about the beginning of everything. There are lots of different ideas out there. Almost every culture has some story of creation and how it began. But I'd like to talk to you about this from the perspective of both Christian faith and science. Many think this is a point of disagreement between the two, but usually they think that because they don't know the true teaching of one of the sides. So I'm going to take a minute looking at both sides to show you how complementary they really are. So first, let's look at the Christian biblical teaching. When most people think of the Christian creation story, they think of the story in Genesis of creation happening in 7 days. But immediately after that, you have a second story of creation more focused on the creation of man. But then what a lot of people forget is that there are actually lots of different creation stories spread throughout many different parts of the Bible. So like in the book of Psalms, you have a very poetic version of creation. You fixed the earth on its foundation, never to be moved. The ocean covered it like a garment. Above the mountains stood the waters. At your roar, they took flight. At the sound of your thunder, they fled. They rushed up the mountains, down the valleys, to the place you had fixed for them. Or, in the book of Isaiah, you see a very measured version of creation, depicting it as very calculated. Who has cupped in his hand the waters of the sea, and marked off the heavens with a span? Who has held in a measure the dust of the earth? Weighed the mountains in scales and the hills in a balance. We even see in the first verse of the Gospel of John an often quoted nod to the beginning of time that gets forgotten when we talk about creation. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The truth about creation from a Catholic perspective is mostly that it happened, that our God physically created time and space, and he didn't just do it all haphazardly. He did it with love and with intentionality. In his book, In the Beginning, the now Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI wrote, "The fundamental truth that the Genesis stories reveal to us is that the world is not a collection of contrasting forces, but has its origin and its stability in the Logos, in God's eternal reason, who continues to sustain the universe." The Catholic Church acknowledges that there are multiple stories and that these stories are images used to evoke an emotion and point to a higher purpose. When it comes to the exact nuts and bolts of how it happened, the Church fully trusts the capacity of scientists to figure that out. They treat the knowledge scientists gain as a gift from God so that we can better understand him and how he created the universe. So what does science teach about creation? In 1927, Father George Lamarche published his theories about a connection between the idea of an expanding universe and Einstein's theory of general relativity. He came up with this idea that at some point there was a singularity where all of this expansion began, and this was the beginning of everything. It wasn't until 2 years later that work by Hubble showed physical proof of this expanding universe, and 2 years after that, that Lemaitre's ideas started to get some traction. Even still, there was some discrepancy over the length of time since the Big Bang. It wasn't until over 30 years later that a study on cosmic microwave background radiation was done in the 60s and cleared up that timeline. So cosmic microwave background radiation, or CMB for short, is radiation in the microwave part of the electromagnetic spectrum, which comes from all directions in outer space. During the Big Bang, a lot of high-energy radiation was created. Then the universe became bigger and colder, causing the high-energy photons to lose most of their original energy. This radiation has been traveling without hitting anything ever since the early years of the universe. Basically, it's the residual heat of creation, the afterglow of the Big Bang, streaming through space for billions of years. Now, as of today, almost 60 years after those studies, we have had time to fine-tune these calculations, thanks to discoveries of dark matter, dark energy, and the inflationary era. And we have come to what we call the standard model of the Big Bang Theory, which makes two assumptions in order to make one big claim. So the big claim is that everything in the observable universe is the remnant of a huge explosion called the Big Bang that took place 13.7 billion years ago. But it is important to discuss those two assumptions. So the first is that the Big Bang is the very beginning of space and time. This means that there was absolutely nothing before the Big Bang. There isn't even a way to measure anything before the Big Bang because there was no time. The second assumption is that even though we cannot see the entire universe due to the speed of light, we assume that what is outside the visible universe acts similarly to the visible universe. To this day, there's absolutely zero proof against either of these assumptions. But some scientists have put their own spins on the standard model. So far, they are mostly hypothetical, but I'm going to briefly discuss the main two as well as their limitations. So the first idea is that, yes, a great expansion began 13.7 billion years ago, but maybe that was just the most recent one of many. This is called the bouncing universe theory. What this means is that the universe has been continuously expanding and then compressing over and over. This idea is a possibility, but it definitely has its limitations. Like, at first, the theory assumed that it had been bouncing forever, infinitely. This has been refuted based on new data calculations of the CMB radiation that we talked about earlier. Due to these calculations, it shows the ratio of high energy starlight to low energy radiation is only 1 to 100, which means that the maximum number of cycles this bouncing universe could have had was 100. This indicates that at some point there was a beginning, even with the bouncing universe theory. The second limitation comes from the second law of thermodynamics, which states that an isolated system will always remain the same or increase in entropy. This means that it's very unlikely that a large system with such a great amount of entropy, like our universe, would ever spontaneously decrease in entropy on its own. Imagine you pop a bag of popcorn. The corn kernels popped open, expanding in size and releasing heat and increasing the entropy of the system. It is very unlikely that just waiting or by cooling, these kernels will somehow go back into the tiny shell where they started. So if a popcorn kernel doesn't want to shrink back down to the higher degree of order it had before, why would our giant universe, which has so much more entropy than a single kernel of corn? Technically, it's possible, due to random chance, but the likelihood of it happening is astronomical. The second big idea is eternal inflation. This one is a little bit more complicated. This one states that our universe is just one piece of the bigger puzzle. So it admits that yes, the Big Bang happened, and that it was the beginning of the expansion of our universe. But there's an infinite number of systems, and these expansion processes are happening in different places, in other universes, and have been infinitely for all time. Again, I have to emphasize that this is just an idea, a well thought out idea, but purely hypothetical. So how does this relate back to the claims made by the Bible and Christianity? Christianity believes that there was a creator who specifically and intentionally created our universe. So can science indicate this idea of creation? Note, I said indicate, because as I've stated in a previous video, science cannot 100% prove that there's a creator, because the creator we believe in is outside of this universe, and our scientific skills study physical phenomena in this universe only. But there is something called an informal inference, a term coined by John Henry Newman. An informal inference is basically the idea that if a whole lot of different things all point to a single thing being the most likely, it's probably true. If you have enough points of proof, even if one theory gets revisions, this doesn't affect the whole because there are so many others. So for this specific problem, what are the many points of proof that science shows points to creation through some supernatural design? Well, as the phrase states, there are many of them, and this YouTube video is not long enough to list them all. What I can do, though, is tell you the general form of a physicist's argument for supernatural design that they came up with based on all these points of data. So first, the values of the universal constants controlling the relationship between space, time, and energy in the universe. Think of things like the speed of light or the mass of an electron. These constants must fall within a very narrow, closed range in order to allow any life form to develop. But the possible values that these universal constants could have had that would have disallowed any life form from developing are so much higher. Therefore, the odds against an anthropic condition, one allowing life, occurring are astronomically higher, making any life form or universal condition allowing a life form exceedingly improbable. This makes it highly unlikely that the conditions for life in the universe occurred by pure chance, which begs for an explanation. There has to be some sort of cause, physical or metaphysical. So after looking at a lot of different data and coming up with these numbers, it can be seen that this did not just happen by pure chance. There must have been some sort of explanation to this design, and it's completely logical to think that this cause was God. Now, I've shared this with you to point out things that we know and things that we don't know. The Catholic Church does not require you to believe everything science teaches. It is not in the church dogma. But the Church has expressed trust in the abilities of scientists and encourages her people to do the same. So when you hear things being announced about astrophysics and our understanding of time and space and our universe, I encourage you not to be scared of it. I encourage you not to jump to the conclusion that it disproves religion and our God. Instead, I strongly hope that you'll look at the discovery and be amazed by the knowledge required to get to that conclusion. Then marvel at how amazing and complex and fascinating our God made our universe. And finally, be thankful that God has allowed us the wisdom to know Him deeper through this understanding of how He intentionally created it all, how He set it in motion. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos. Leave a comment if there's any particular topic that you would like me to cover. If you just want more information of the day-to-day interactions between faith and science, head over to my website at www.catechistscientist.com to read my blog and for links to my social media. On both Instagram and Twitter, you can find me at IST2. If you like this content and would like to help keep it going, please head over to patreon.com/IST2 and help fund this new and exciting enterprise. Thanks!